Good afternoon. It's David Garland here. It's Saturday, June 27th on a Saturday afternoon, and welcome to the first episode of Bridging the Divide. I'm your host, David Garland. Again, our goal here is to provide an unbiased point of view so people can understand what's actually going on in the world rather than hearing it filtered through biased media. So what we're going to do is start with looking at the New York Times headlines, right? The review editorial pages. And going back a little bit here, we see June 15th, it says President Trump lost this war. In other words, the war in Iran was a disaster, completely lost. That's a bit of a mixed truth, right? So it definitely did not go as he had hoped. What he had hoped, from what people can gather, or what I can gather, is that basically they would disrupt the status quo and that the citizens of Iran would forcibly take over and establish democracy in the country. There's been a long history there of issues between the United States and Iran, going back even, before the 1979 Iranian hostage crisis, when the Shah was left the country, fled, and became Islamic Republic, overseen by the Ayatollah. But there's been an ongoing back and forth between the two countries since then. More recently, in 2015, President Obama signed an agreement, but it's pretty clear that President Trump said enough is enough. We've given them too many chances. It's time to take action. So jointly with Israel, they started a war back earlier this year. And the hope, again, as I said, was that the people would take over. The citizens of Iran, and there's a lot of well-educated youth in Iran, a lot of university-educated students who also are not particularly keen on an Islamic Republic having, the Ayatollah be the supreme ruler. They want freedom. They want a more westernized type of, in their country, economics. They want the economy to grow and flourish, which it hasn't been for quite some time and is now in even worse condition. Problem is they don't have weapons, and they weren't really in a position to forcibly take over the government, even if some of the key levers were destroyed. So what happened is the Ayatollah did die, and his son took over, and the verdict's still out as to whether he's more of an extreme character than his father was. They signed a truce recently. This is after this particular editorial where they said we lost the war, signed a truce between the two countries, and that truce has now been violated, first in Lebanon because Israel bombed parts of Lebanon, which was part of that truce, as part of the ceasefire. So they reacted to that, and then they also reacted to a cargo ship going through the strait and bombed that because they said it was going through disallowed territory in the Strait of Hormuz. They bombed that, and now the U.S. is retaliating. So there's an ongoing struggle here. This was a ceasefire. It was not a permanent agreement. The ceasefire was meant to provide time for a permanent agreement to be drafted and signed off and agreed to. But it's pretty clear that the ceasefire is not holding at the moment. There's a lot of debate about whether there's a handful of people that say that this was the right move. I would say the vast majority of people think it's not. I think polling shows that the majority of Americans are opposed to this war. There's a lesser number of people that think that the Iranian regime has been severely weakened, and there has been some damage done, but I also think the United States, their reputation has been severely weakened, because prior to this, the assumption was similar to, the former superpower Russia and Ukraine, that this would not be a struggle. That Ukraine was no match for the vast, powerful military of the former Soviet Union, now Russia. And after 3 years of war there, it's pretty clear it wasn't. In fact, recently there have been some gains on the part of Ukraine showing that Russia is actually being pushed back a little bit. So I think, if anything, there's a similar type of damage to the current, one might argue, sole superpower, or maybe co-superpower, at least in the superpower in the Western Hemisphere anyway. But there is, one might argue, that China's a superpower as well. But leaving that aside, the military might and this belief that the U.S. had the most powerful military in the world. That status has been severely damaged through this exercise. As a matter of fact, they came to a stalemate pretty much, the United States and Iran, and the fact that Iran could bring the United States to a truce, a ceasefire, means that the United States is not as formidable as an opponent as one might have guessed. Now, I don't know why that happened, but a lot of munitions were used and drawn down, and apparently U.S. munitions supplies are severely depleted now. Trump has tried to increase those numbers again by giving companies special provisions and economic breaks to convert to munitions manufacturing so we can get those supplies and stores of munitions back up again. But this is not at all the result that one would have anticipated. Just as so, that's kind of that's where we're at, and that's the heart of the matter as to why the New York Times editorial page is saying Trump lost the war.